So I believe a few episodes ago, you had been under the impression that we were going to talk about our favorite films of all time.
I remember that.
Yeah. So let's bring that up now when it's appropriate, not back then when it wasn't.
I love this.
Let me ask you a question here.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Is Home Alone your favorite film?
Oh, no.
No way.
No, absolutely not. It's not even one of my favorite films.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have expected that. We're really disappointing the audience here.
No, don't say that. Well, I never suggested anything. What?
Nothing about this show should have convinced anyone that we're huge fans of Home Alone.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm not a fan of it. I'm just saying it's not one of my favorite films.
Okay. All right.
It's not one of my, I wouldn't put it in my top 10, say. I'd put it in my top 50.
Okay, yeah.
Probably. What about you?
You know what I'll say? I'll say Home Alone is my favorite Christmas film. And in saying that, what I mean is that I can watch Home Alone endlessly around Christmas, and I never get tired of it. Every year, it still keeps being funny. I still keep enjoying the gags. It's also, I don't know, it's a short family film, and it's got a lot of nostalgic appeal. So yeah, it's one of my favorite Christmas films. Favorite films? No, not quite.
I haven't watched Home Alone in years. What are some of your favorite films?
Number one favorite film.
Oh, you have a number one.
I do have a number one, and this is another film that I can watch endlessly.
It's got Rodney Dangerfield in it.
It doesn't.
Oh,
no,
okay.
It's not. It's not Rover Dangerfield. It is The Fellowship of the Ring, a film that I actually saw 14 times in theater. And it is endlessly enjoyable to me. Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite film. That's my number one. How about you?
Wow.
You don't have to have a number one, but what are one of your favorite films?
I could pretty safely do a top 5. I could do a top 3. I would put Double Indemnity up there.
That's an old one.
Jackie Brown. And 12 Angry Men, probably.
I haven't seen the original. I saw the one with Jack Lemmon they did for TV in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that's not as good.
It's not as good.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah. It's not as good. My favorite John Hughes film is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But I would safely say that my favorite Chris Columbus film is Home Alone.
Yeah.
So it's on a number one list.
Yeah,
it's on a number one list.
I don't even know if it's my favorite Chris Columbus film because I really enjoy Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mrs. Doubtfire is really good.
I have a great time with Mrs. Doubtfire, and you know what? I'm not even ashamed to say it. I really enjoy Stepmom. Stepmom hits me in the right spots when you're hitting.
Do you think you like Stepmom more than Home Alone?
No. It is between Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire. Although I will say neither on my top 10 list. Top 10 list, I'd go with films like, said Fellowship of the Ring already, The Royal Tenenbaums.
You can say Fellowship twice if you want to.
I probably should because I saw it 14 times.
Right.
The Royal Tenenbaums, Alien, Thelma and Louise, which is one of my favorite screenplays. Character development is done so well in that film. I love Thelma and Louise, and that's one that I didn't come to until just a few years ago either. I'd never seen it before a few years ago. And despite how many wonderful films Ridley Scott has made, Thelma and Louise still rivals my love for Blade Runner and for Alien.
And Alien.
Yeah.
And Gladiator 2.
And Gladiator 2.
Thanks for asking, because I think it's a good question, and I think it's a question I've been wanting to answer for weeks, even though I wasn't prepared then, and I don't know that I'm even prepared now. Yeah,
I feel like there's been a lot of confusion in my life. The people that I care about, relatives, wondering why I host a show that's about Home Alone. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't really tell them that it was my favorite film. It was just, I don't know, a film I thought I could do a show about.
It's the greatest film of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't argue with that.
Right.
Is it my favorite film? Is it
Absolutely not.
Yeah. No.
But I just have bad taste.
How do you like The Big Chill?
Love it. Love it. It's probably my favorite Kasdan film.
I'd say it's definitely.
No, you know what? I changed my mind.
Body
my
Heat.
favorite Kasdan film's Body Heat. But it's just Double Indemnity all over again, basically. I'm a sucker.
I haven't seen Double Indemnity. I don't remember much about Body Heat. I do love The Big Chill. And I love all of the stuff that Lawrence Kasdan's done with Spielberg. Body
Heat, really hot. Big Chill, really cold. Fire and Ice.
Also, on my top 10 list is Heat. So, comes full circle.
There you go. And
Robert De Niro.
And what about Stand By Me, which is based on the novella The Body?
Wasn't a huge fan of Stand By Me. If I got to pick a Rob Reiner film, it's A Few Good Men, which is probably also on my top 10 list. Also, got to put one Ron Howard out there, Apollo 13. I can watch Apollo 13 endlessly. That film is amazing.
Ron Howard can accidentally make a good film once in a while. I'll give him that. It's a big one. It's the countdown. It's that spectacular episode, the last one of the year. Welcome back to the Long Road Home Alone, huh?
Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year,
well,
Jimmy.
Not quite yet. Well, do you say Happy New Year's Eve? I don't think so.
I think you say Merry Christmas a few days before Christmas, the holiday season. I think once Christmas has passed, all this week, we've safely been able to say Happy New Year.
All right.
It's preemptive, but I think it's a nice gesture. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We're not there yet. We are about 45 minutes, maybe a little under an hour away, but we're going to be counting that down with you all night.
We can't wait. Thank you for joining us.
The ball is going to drop here, and we want to thank Bill Sikorsky so much for giving us this prime spot.
It's huge. It's a new era. It's incredible to be here, and thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, entire city of Sheboygan, to be here. Well, I feel like Ryan Seacrest.
I have been dreaming of hosting a New Year's show in Sheboygan since I was 3 years old.
New Year's Rockin' Eve.
Dream come true.
Road, Rockin' Home Alone. Here we go.
All right. Well, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think since it's the last episode of the year, we want to end the year in a bang before we get started on whatever's next, right? I think what we should talk about today.
Well, we're talking about Fuller next week, I think.
True. Yeah. That's right.
Yep.
And I think that's a topic that people have really been looking forward to.
People need to know about bedwetters. Yeah. I'll disclose this right now. I used to be a bedwetter.
Yeah.
Not a lot of fun.
Not anymore, though?
I'm not anymore. No.
Great. Good. And we think that Fuller probably isn't either. But I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. I think new year, new us, new stories about Fullers. That's all great. Today, I think what we really want to talk about is what happens between the scenes. What happens after we leave characters when time passes? And also, what's the fallout from all of this?
The scenes between the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
One in particular that comes to mind is the night of. Kevin goes upstairs and casts his wish to Santa Claus or Jesus or whomever. I wish they would all just disappear.
Monkey's paw.
Yeah, exactly. And the rest of the family is downstairs. And I've got to wonder what it is that happened that made no one in the house, 4 grown adults, each of which have at least 4 children.
Right.
No one wakes up before 8 a.m.
Right.
What's the reasoning behind that? What happened?
Yeah. Well, Kate goes back down the stairs after she sent Kevin to bed. I think before Kate even gets back, the tension has diffused in the kitchen. I think Peter's like, all right, let's get this all cleaned up here. Come on, no big deal. Everybody relax. Remember, it's vacation. Come on, guys, it's vacation.
Let's relax. What's one way we can relax? Let's get some beers. Let's get some beers over here.
He and Frank from across the room, they give a meaningful look to each other. A look that only lifelong brothers have.
Frank's pants are splashed with Pepsi. Peter looks at him and says, you know what I got that's going to go well with that Pepsi? Some Jack Daniels. That's what gets broken open.
Crown Royal.
I think Kate, Leslie, and Heather all go on have a few bottles of wine. I think this is a night to celebrate.
It's a bender.
Yeah. You've got...
They're like, we have this long flight tomorrow. We don't have to drive to the airport. We're getting picked up by the shuttles. And then the adults are like, well, we're in the lap of luxury luxury flying first class across the Atlantic Ocean. It's like an 8-hour flight. What do we have to do but get drunk tonight?
Let's do it. And we got a college student here. Let's feel cool as old people from...
Right. Her parents aren't here. We're the aunts and the uncles.
I always gotten the sense that Heather and Kate in particular have a very special relationship. Like, Heather comes down from Northwestern every few weekends and is like, hey, Kate, let's go shopping and get drunk a few days. They have this relationship where it feels like Kate relies on Heather in ways that she doesn't, even her own children. Like, did Heather order the pizza? The kids automatically assume that that was the case, but no, Buzz did. You wake up the next morning and Heather is the one doing the head count. That relationship between Heather and Kate, and Leslie's going to be pulled into that as well. Those three had a good party that night.
Now, do you think that there's this breaking off that I feel like often happens in larger families, multi-generational families at the holidays that are getting together, where the adults go off and they're doing their thing and they're throwing some back and talking about the good old times, and the kids get that tacit permission to go do whatever the hell they want to. The parents aren't going to be breathing down their necks.
Yeah, you watch some rated R films if you want.
Right.
I imagine that Buzz snuck a few beers. Peter maybe even gave him a few beers, but I guarantee you he at least snuck a few shots of that Jack Daniels.
You bet. Or I think it's possible that Buzz has some super schnapps or something stashed away upstairs.
MD 2020.
And he's like, hey, Rod,
come here. I'm gonna be the cool cousin. I'm gonna get you
Rod's
drunk.
Never touched the stuff.
No,
he's like,
Rod is very much like, I don't know. But
he's like, cuz your parents live in Europe, man. Kids get to drink in France. We're just getting ready.
And you know what I think this leads to? You have that flashback the next day where Kevin flashes back to all of his family being mean to him. The one flashback that isn't actually pulled from the film is Buzz saying, Kevin, I'm going to feed you to my tarantula. I think this is a prank that Buzz played on Kevin after he went to bed. I think that Buzz and Rod got drunk and then they said, hey, let's go mess with Kevin upstairs. And he goes up there. Kevin's already asleep. Lights are off. Buzz pulls a flashlight out and says, Kevin, I'm going to feed you to my tarantula. And that's how Kevin wakes up in the middle of the night, being pranked by Buzz, who is drunk.
We know it happened. We didn't see it happen, but we know that it happened.
Exactly.
I think that they all had a jolly good time, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
I also love to imagine Kevin being up in the attic while he's hearing this drunken
revelry
party going on downstairs. Everyone is just so happy that I went to bed.
Right.
You know, it makes him more embittered against his family,
yes,
I think.
It reconfirms his wish to make them all disappear.
And then on top of all of this drunken craziness, you have a snowstorm that knocks the power out, knocks the phones out, and then all of the McAllisters wake up late. And I tell you what, Rod probably wouldn't have been the kind of guy to wake up late, but he's never had alcohol before. And so he also woke up late. Like, I've never been hungover before. I had 2 Labatt Lights, and that was enough for me. I don't need anything more than that.
Oh, thanks. I've seen the other side, and brother, let me tell you, it's no good.
And then everyone is hungover the next morning, and they all wake up after 8 a.m., which makes no sense for adults.
And that's why Heather's all irritable. Buzz, don't be a moron.
Exactly.
There's no way on earth we're going to make this plane. It leaves in 45 minutes.
Think positive, Frank.
You be positive. I'll be realistic.
So before the film starts, Harry is going around to all of the houses on Lincoln Boulevard in Winnetka, trying to figure out who's going to be home and who isn't. We assume he goes to the Murphys. He knows they're not going to be home because they're going to be in Orlando. He goes to the McAllisters. The other person he must have gone to is Old Man Marley. And I have to imagine that given the rumors going around about Old Man Marley, this had to be a fun conversation. I'm just picturing Harry knocking on the door and Old Man Marley just sighing and saying, how many times do I have to deal with this? I am not the South Bend shovel slayer. And Harry having to deal with a man who's been accused of being the South Bend shovel slayer by his neighbors for years.
Opening the door, the house is dark. It's got like one light on in another room. He opens it like a crypt keeper and just peers his ghastly face out at Harry. How do you think Harry reacts to that?
I don't know. I'm just picturing him asking like, hey, you gonna be spending much time with your relatives this year? You know, like trying to case the place. I don't know. I've also got to imagine that old man Marley lives a pretty modest life. So even if Harry was casing the place, I don't know. I just see him as a guy who's living a very modest life that robbers wouldn't even be interested.
Harry's got a lot of ground to cover. He's got to make all the stops. I think it's quick. He goes, are you traveling for the holidays? You know, just going around making sure everyone's taking the right precautions.
Yeah.
Marley says, no. He's like, all right, very good. You be safe this holiday season. Merry Christmas. And I think he leaves. And then he goes, okay, not that place.
Cuts it out. Watch out for that guy. He's pretty close to these other places we're going to be robbing from. Hopefully he doesn't notice the same plumbing company is going to these unoccupied homes.
Right. He seems like a recluse. The curtains are drawn. It should be fine.
Just leave him alone.
So what about all of the travel that we don't see? This is something that I think is interesting to consider, right? So by the time that the rest of the McAllisters land in Paris, it's crisis mode. Kate's trying to find her way back, right? She never leaves the airport.
Yep.
So then we spend a lot of time with Kevin, the bulk of Act 2.
Yes.
We know that Kate has some roundabout travel. What I really wonder is about her long trip, because I think we've done the math. And I think from Scranton to Winnetka is probably a 12-hour drive if weather's okay.
Yeah. Which I believe the script said it wasn't okay. So probably even longer.
She's in that budget van for a long time with the Kenosha Kickers.
Yep.
And the little moments we see, she's gracious as she can be, but she's annoyed.
She looks incredibly uncomfortable, especially when Gus Polinski keeps trying to push the clarinet on her to try it. Like,
try it.
You can't just try an instrument you've never played before, okay? That makes absolutely no sense. And I also don't want to... I mean, on top of that, instruments are disgusting. Have you ever seen Whiplash? They are blowing saliva out of these instruments as a means of just keeping them clean.
And that's clearly a Kate thing. She's disgusted by it.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to put my mouth on that thing that you've been putting your mouth on.
Yeah.
Well, what about this though? What do you think Kate learns in that 12 to 15 hour drive?
I honestly don't know. I think you clearly see that she has some kind of like conversation going on with Gus Polinski. I feel like she's in the back corner. She is isolated from the rest of the Kenosha Kickers. It is probably her and Gus the entire time. I've got to imagine the back of that van with like 8 men back there. It's got to smell awful too. This has to be one of the most uncomfortable rides that Kate has ever taken. I don't know what she learns from the experience. Maybe don't do that. Maybe Kevin would just be okay the next time I leave him home alone and I can just get a flight back instead of taking a budget van.
I've got to wonder what she knew about polka, the genre of music, or frankly, the state of Wisconsin.
I don't.
Before this ride with the Kenosha Kickers, I bet she comes away with some new information. She may not find it interesting, but I think she's been given a crash course education in some stuff that she doesn't know much about.
I've got to imagine that Gus told a number of stories about all of the greatest shows that they played back in the 70s.
Right.
And what it was like, when polka was at its height in Wisconsin. I'm sure she heard every single story Gus Polinski had to tell about that.
Whether she likes it or not, Kate is now an authority on the Kenosha Kickers,
yes.
A little known, unsuccessful, washed up polka band from Kenosha.
Do you think she bought one of their albums after this trip? as a way of saying thank you. As
I
a
wonder.
as a way of telling her family, these are the guys that got me back home to Kevin. May not like their music so much, but they're some good guys.
And if so, maybe it becomes a tradition to play a record or a tape from the Kenosha Kickers around the holidays.
Bob Mahucci Polka, aka Kiss Me Polka.
Polka Twist. Okay, what about, meanwhile, Peter's?
Go across the pond,
Across
over
the
into
pond.
Paris. Frank and Leslie and their family, they didn't leave any kids behind.
They've arrived.
Yeah, they're where they
on
want to be.
vacation.
And Frank, despite the fact that Kevin's back there and occasionally trying to be supportive to his brother, is still enjoying the good times. He goes into the fridge. Oh my God, these people have shrimp. I'm going to give this to everyone.
Yeah, the Ohio McAllisters, they're living the good life. They're like, nah, good luck.
Rod
Good
and
luck
Heather
with
are
that.
back with their family. I've got to imagine that conversation comes up, because the thing that's hanging over this entire thing is the fact that Heather did the head count wrong. And that is sitting in Heather's mind and in Pete and Kate's mind the entire trip. One thing I do want to point out, Heather is not in the sequel. And I'm wondering if maybe that wrong head count plays into the Chicago McAllisters and their planning for their future Christmas events.
It could be and we've talked about this a little bit in the past too, so I don't want to relitigate it too much, but it could be a two-way street too. It could be after this whole fiasco, Heather goes, I'm done traveling with this side of the extended family.
Yeah.
Too much can go wrong. It's just a big mess. I'm going to spend it local this year.
Yeah. Let me hang out with some college friends, just enjoy Christmas that way.
Yeah.
I get the sense Georgette doesn't really care for Frank based on the fact that he's serving this shrimp, which was saved for later, and just keeps ignoring her. But I do like the idea that when brothers get together, there's a whole fiasco that you get to see. Peter and Kate are terrible parents. They left their family back in Chicago. Let's spend some time just gossiping about that.
You get a different dynamic when you have more siblings,
Yes.
right? And some will play both sides. You know, there are personality traits that really come out the larger a family becomes.
Yes.
Some might play both sides. Some might be very much aligned with one more than the other. There may be factions. There may be allegiances.
When it comes to three siblings in particular, you've got Frank is the oldest, Peter's the middle brother, Rob is the youngest. It seems strange to me that the oldest and the youngest would have any kind of bond. If there was any kind of bond between the brothers, it would be between Peter and Frank and Peter and Rob, I think.
But I mean, these relationships could evolve over time.
they could,
It
yes.
doesn't, the relationships they have as kids don't necessarily reflect those relationships as adults.
This is
Keep
true.
in mind now, of course, Rob and Georgette have sent their child to live not with Peter, the middle brother,
yes.
but with Frank, the eldest brother.
That is just a baffling circumstance to me. I don't understand why Rob and Georgette, as New York McAllisters, they move away from their place in Manhattan to Paris. We've talked about this before, but leave Rob in Ohio with Frank.
Right.
He's being uprooted either way.
Right.
Why are they sending him to Ohio? If he lives in New York, I feel like Chicago would be a much better place for him to finish out his high school career
Right.
than Ohio.
So before the break, we were just talking about this relationship that must exist between Frank and Rob, Georgette and Leslie too, but ultimately, how does Rod end up in Ohio?
There's got to be a reason for why Rod was sent to Ohio, to Frank, which I think we can all assume is probably the least responsible McAllister of the three brothers.
Seems like it.
The least likable as well. I can't imagine Rod was all that excited about going to live with Uncle Frank in Ohio, having gone to school in Manhattan.
Right.
What was it about that sent Rod to Ohio instead of Chicago?
I wish I knew.
We touched on this a little bit in the last episode. There's been a hint that maybe Peter McAllister has some criminal background. And Rob did not want his son living in the house of somebody who has that criminal background, who runs a front for the organized criminal organizations.
The syndicate.
Yes.
Wow. He's my brother. I love him. The family's welcome to visit, but no way my kid is living under that roof.
Yeah. I'm not going to let him be a part of whatever
I don't
Peter
want him
got
exposed
into.
to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love him. He's my brother. Never rat him out, but I'm not exposing my children to this.
Right. Also, maybe Rod is like, I can't live with Buzz.
Yeah.
You guys, I can't live
It's too
with
much.
Buzz.
The guy just spends all of his time trying to be the cool guy in front of me. And I get that I'm not cool. I get that I'm like the student, but I don't need to be around Buzz.
I just need to focus on my studies. That house is mayhem. It's total chaos. I can't possibly live in Winnetka
Anytime
with those fools.
Anytime I spend time in Buzz's room, he's always trying to sneak me shots. I'm just not into that.
Show
okay?
me naked babes.
Peter's
really
also
uncomfortable.
Peter's also got a drinking problem, and maybe Rob doesn't want Rod around that either.
I think it makes sense. I think it is possible that, going back to the family dynamic, I think it's also possible that when Frank and Leslie and Rob and Georgette all get together, I think maybe they all get along pretty well. They maybe have more in common with each other, in particular, no criminal ties.
Yes.
And when Kate and Peter and all of those McAllister kids leave, now the rest of them are just in Paris now, and I think they got a lot to say about to each other.
Yes.
Behind Kate and Peter's backs.
How could
Can
you
you believe that they left their kid home alone?
It's just all the stress that Peter's under because he's dealing with these criminal ties.
I've told him a million times he's going to get it over his head. It's just like Dad always told us. You can't follow in Grandpa's footsteps.
Don't get high off your own supply. Let's move on to after the end of the film. The McAllisters are all reunited. They're all back together.
There's so many questions here.
Yes.
There's so many questions.
So I don't want to talk about the day of, but there's a lot that happens in this community. Lincoln Boulevard, you had at least 2 houses, I think, that got robbed. There was one attempted robbery, though maybe that never gets out. One house was flooded for sure. And there's going to be a lot of repercussions for that. I mean, where are the Murphys even going to live while their house is being repaired?
Right.
I've also got to imagine that if Peter McAllister is a general contractor, he's going to buddy up to Jack Murphy over there. He's going to say, hey, you know what? I can give you a discount on that. My son Buzz is going to college in a few years. You think you could slot him into an internship at your marketing firm or whatever it is that you do to get a big house in Winnetka?
I mean, we've talked a little bit in the past about Kevin and Mitch Murphy's relationship. We figure they're probably neighborhood buddies.
Yes.
I don't know if they're the best of friends, but they spend time with each other because they're next door neighbors.
Yeah.
They're the same age. They're up in the treehouse. They're screwing around. They're both precocious. They're both, shall we say, capable of causing trouble.
Yes. I imagine
for fun.
I imagine that they play pranks together. They have sleepovers at each other's houses. Maybe not in the basement because, Kevin's afraid of that. But,
right.
And then I've got to imagine, too, that Kevin, being Mitch Murphy's friend from right across the street, is going to be somebody that Kate encourages. Go over there. See how Mitch is doing. He's going through a hard time right now. His Christmas was ruined. They went to Orlando and came back and found their house destroyed. All of the presents have been robbed. And even if they get those back, it's not the same thing when you just get a pile of junk that's been unwrapped by the wet bandits. And I've also got to imagine that Kevin, he's a kid and he's not going to be able to keep that secret that the wet bandits robbed the Murphys. That's going to come out at some point, whether it comes out to Mitch or if it comes out at school. He's going to admit that he knows more than they think he does.
What about Kevin and Marley's ongoing relationship? They each owe one another sort of a debt of gratitude.
Yeah. Marley saved Kevin's fingers. Big deal. I mean, I'd remember that for the rest of my life. And Kevin encourages Marley to get his family back. And that's kind of a big deal as well.
They have breakthroughs together, and they share this secret.
His relationship with Old Man Marley changes the neighborhood's perception about him. Their curiosity about whether or not he saw what the Wet Bandits were doing while they were all off traveling for the holidays. I wonder, even if Kevin's not involved, do you think other neighbors go up to Old Man Marley and say, hey, yeah, did you see that happening? Do you know what was going on back here? You know, like just that need for neighborhood gossip might pull him into the fold.
Here's something that we also don't see. We can speculate on, but we don't know exactly what happens between Marley rescuing Kevin, let's get you home, and then the police showing up and arresting the incapacitated Wet Bandits. I assume that Marley speaks to the police. He doesn't include Kevin in any of this. He goes, let's get you home and keep you out of it. But he calls the police. He keeps the Wet Bandits at bay in the house. They get arrested. And then he gives the statement to the police saying, I saw some of these guys creeping around. I followed them. That's my neighbor's house. I knocked him out. And I think in that way, he makes an official statement. And in doing so, he alerts the entire neighborhood that he's actually the neighborhood hero.
I don't know about that. Kevin's the one who calls the police. He calls them from his own house and he says, it's me, Murphy.
That's true. You are right. That's true. But I still think that Marley must hold them at bay.
I don't think he does, given his past, given what just happened with him and Harry, the police harassing him. I don't think Marley wants any involvement with whatever happened at the Murphys.
There's just no way. There's no way that the police, that they don't catch these guys. These guys are beaten up. They've been concussed. That something happened to these guys. The cops don't just go. And then furthermore, they got a call. My house is being robbed. My name's Murphy. Murphy's not there when the cops get there. The cops aren't done with this.
It's possible Old Man Marley filled in all those holes for the police.
I think Marley said, look, I try to keep to myself around here, but one, I need to protect my friend Kevin for reasons unknown. Two, it's about time that I flip the script around here. Look, I don't want a ticker tape parade, but I am going to talk to the cops and I am going to talk to the Murphys when they get back. And I'm going to say, I caught those guys in your house, and a tip of the hat to you.
If that's the case, I think maybe Old Man Marley does get brought into the neighborhood stuff. I think his reunion with his family, too, is going to put to bed all of these rumors that are going around about him. Although those rumors are probably still going to persist in Kevin's social sphere at school and whatnot. And now that Kevin has befriended the South Bend Shovel Slayer, he is a kid who I don't get the sense that he's like master of his grade. You know, I don't think he's the cool guy. I think Kevin is somebody who's bullied at school pretty frequently. I bet you the next time that his bully tries to give him a swirly or whatever the heck kids did to each other in school back in the 90s, he's going to be like, listen, I'm best friends with the South Bend Shovel Slayer. You mess with me again, and he's going to turn you into a mummy in his can.
You shopping? I got you milk, eggs, and fabric softener.
No kidding. What a funny guy. What else did you do while we were away?
Just hung around.
How long do you think the Wet Bandits were sentenced to prison for?
Do you think they pled guilty? Do you think they took a plea, or do you think they took it to trial?
I bet they pled. I bet it was a pretty open and shut case, and I've got to imagine their lawyer. I've also got to imagine the fact that they were sentenced together. We assume they were sentenced together. Is that a normal thing? You commit a crime with somebody and you go through the courts together and you're just sent to the same prison? I mean, I would imagine that if you're part of some criminal group, they would want to break you up and send you elsewhere. But the Wet Bandits remain a cohesive unit until the sequel, if you acknowledge such things.
They have a dual trial in My Cousin Vinny.
This is true. Yeah. We didn't see where they were sentenced. They did go to jail together. They went to a holding cell together.
I think you're right. I think the Wet Bandits took a plea.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really don't know what the sentencing criteria was for breaking and entering and robbery and grand larceny and property
destruction.
damage. And, you know, there's just so many crimes that have been committed and a string of them. I think they're going, I mean, with a plea deal, I say they're probably going away for a range, probably like
10 to 15 years.
Yeah, 10 to 15, 10 to 20.
Yeah.
They, you know, maybe they get out in 7 if they get an associate's degree or something.
We know each and every house that you hit. There are just all of these crimes tied to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going away for a while. They don't stay there, but, you know, they're going away for a while.
Yeah.
What do you imagine their prison sentence was like? This is a fantastical film, so let's just assume they went to the same prison. Let's assume they went to the same cell. How do you think the Wet Bandits hold up in prison? Because they're pretty goofy guys, you know?
I think that now maybe this bucks expectations, but I think that Marv does better in prison than Harry.
Really?
Yeah. I think Harry is in the joint, one track mind. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to figure out how to escape. I got to do the next job. This life ain't for me. I got to be out on the streets.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't take too long for Marv to be like, 3 hots and a cot. I get some more meals every day. I'm playing checkers with this guy over here.
I have friends.
Yeah, right. I got people to talk to. I'm kicking back. I can see him sort of like hands behind his head, sort of like, leg over his knee, laying on the cot and just telling his bunkmate a story.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'd imagine it to be a harder experience for the Wet Bandits, and I'd imagine Marv being the one who is bullied the most. I get the sense that Marv is the guy who can't defend himself. He's never been in a fight before, and he is a bully magnet. Somebody looks at Marv and thinks, that guy is a doof, and I can just beat him up and show everyone how tough I am. And I bet you Harry turns into Casino Goodfellas, Joe Pesci. I bet you Harry...
Murderous streak.
I bet you Harry shanks some guys in prison.
Day one.
In defense of Marv, probably in defense of himself too, because I've got to imagine people looked at him and said, well, there's an easy target. And Harry said, I don't think so.
Slice him up.
Yep.
It depends on what kind of institution they went to.
This is true.
I mean, if it's like Oz... You know?
Yeah.
But if they went to some minimum security, like a prison camp.
Yeah, I mean,
like that, where they're like doing road work or something.
Yeah, that's largely just people who don't want to cause any trouble. They're people who had sentences and just want to serve out their time without any incident. Yeah, it's possible they could have been then lumped into that kind of thing.
We also, like, if we assume that the police never find out about the Kevin of it all,
yes,
then as far as we know about the Wet Bandits, they've not committed any violent crimes.
This is true. Yeah.
It's a lot of counts, but depending on the sentencing, again, and the judge or whomever, right? The prosecutor, the plea deal, it might have been they went to a minimum security joint.
Yeah. They do break out. A lot easier to break out a minimum security
than a max.
Exactly.
Than a max pen.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, going back to the McAllisters and the fallout from that, what do you think the neighborhood thinks about Kevin?
I have got to imagine that Kate and Peter are going to try to keep Kevin being left home under wraps. They're the kind of family who is going to want to save face in the neighborhood, and as much as possible, they're going to want to keep their kids from telling the neighborhood, listen, we're sorry we left you home alone, but we're going to look like if we let the neighborhood know that we left you home alone while we went to Paris, okay? So can you just keep this to yourselves?
Unless someone was listening to the police scanner.
This is true. Although you can't necessarily tie my name is Murphy.
No,
from a kid's voice.
I mean when Kate calls Village Police Department and they send the police officer over to the house. There's probably some chatter over the radio.
Some kind of record of that.
We're going to what amounts to the McAllister's house.
And I bet you there's
Check about a kid left home alone.
I bet you there's some gossipy people in Winnetka who just read the registers, what calls are coming in.
The police blotter.
What's
it shows
the
up
news?
in the Winnetka Town Crier's police blotter.
Yep.
Where it's like police were dispatched to this address
just to check on him.
Check on a child left home alone. The house was considered empty and secure.
Yeah.
And police left.
Going back to that secret that Kevin's keeping, he is an 8-year-old kid who foiled grown adults robbing his house, grown professional robbers. That's not staying under his hat too long, and that's going to get around the neighborhood at school too.
Now, do you think it's possible that people in the neighborhood know, or they don't know, but they know, right, about Peter and Peter's possible organized crime ties? And maybe they think, okay, next door neighbors, depends on what they know happened here, right? But do you think any of the neighbors are like, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. As far as I know, that could be mob related.
Yes.
That could be payback for something, and I'm just not even going to acknowledge it.
I tell you what, I live in a neighborhood where I'm pretty sure that there are criminal goings on in a few different houses, and I just mind my own business.
You keep your head down.
That is the smart thing to do. If they want to cook meth over there, that's none of my business, okay? I mean, unless I want to buy some.
Or in case it blows your house up.
But don't do drugs.
No. Thank you.
I've got to imagine people in Winnetka know when to keep their head down. No, well, maybe they don't, actually. That's not really something you'll really learn unless you live in that kind of neighborhood. Peter's going to be some kind of anomaly as far as organized crime goes. So I imagine there's going to be some kind of curiosity there, but also a need to keep your distance because we don't want to be associated with those kind of people.
Right. Though in those upper crust neighborhoods, especially in the suburbs of the big cities, the mob-related cities.
Yeah.
Across the river from New York and New Jersey, the upper crust neighborhoods. You'd think similarly in the affluent neighborhoods outside of Chicago. You might have a neurosurgeon living right next door to someone who that person knows is mob-related, but they go... I know that. They're my neighbor, but they're not bringing their stuff around here.
Yeah.
Right?
On
They're
top
super rich. Me too.
Yeah.
We got more in common than we do not.
And there are some great stories that you can tell at cocktail parties when you live next door to a mobster. And let's stay in good with them so we can cultivate as many of those stories as we can.
Right.
Did the Wet Bandits come to Winnetka to rob Mitch Murphy because Peter McAllister drew them there from the dregs of society?
Ooh. Or do you think it's payback? Do you think the Wet Bandits are somehow mob affiliated or organized crime affiliated?
And in some way tied to Peter?
Or know Peter and they want to hit his house? Harry doesn't come right out and say it.
No.
That's the silver tuna, but maybe it's a vendetta.
I will say that this theory has occurred to me. The reason I don't think it's plausible is that Harry meets Peter. They come face to face, and Peter has no idea who Harry is.
Oh, I mean, that could be, though. If Peter's high enough up, and Harry's just some
low enough down,
soldier
just
henchman,
trying to make his way in this world, he knows that guy is pretending.
Right. Or he knows that if he hits this house, it will carry favor with his boss.
Odd marketable securities. That is a specific detail that I don't think you would pull about most houses you were trying to break into.
Right. And also the super wealthy. I mean, how many of them are keeping assets like that in their house and not at the bank?
Yeah.
Typically, you're keeping stuff like that outside of the banking system.
You don't want it registered. You don't want the government knowing about it. You don't want a text.
Exactly. These are private secret assets of yours that you have perhaps gotten your hands on in extra legal ways.
I love that theory. I love the idea that the Wet Bandits were drawn to Winnetka because Peter's involved in organized crime, and Harry knew it. And he said, let's go get him. That is a rich guy I've seen before. I work with people who work with him. He's got some cash. Let's go get it. And if there's any other cash to round up in the other houses, let's get that too.
And I'll bet you if this is the case, once Peter comes back home and he finds out all of this about the Murphys getting robbed and everything, I'll bet you Peter puts it together and he knows. And if he doesn't know exactly what happened, I'll bet Peter has a pretty good idea that Kevin is not telling the whole story.
Yeah.
He's going, I know you know something, kid.
Peter also is the one who picks up the gold tooth. And I feel like that is honey, what's this?
What's this?
And I bet he's going to look at that and he's going to say, wait a second, I know somebody who has a gold tooth.
Right. Wow, I can't believe it. Another great year behind us. Ton of amazing content and just a terrific year to spend with you, my host, and with the town of Sheboygan. I'm so excited again that we get to be here tonight, counting it down with y'all.
The new year is almost here.
It's so close. It's so close. Jimmy, how you feeling?
We are just minutes away. I can't wait. I have been dreaming my entire life of counting down to the new year for 60 seconds so that the entire town can hear.
The town is filled in the town square. We've got the ball. It's queued up. I know that they have the things that blow up and blow all the confetti. They've got them all rigged up. I'm gleeful. I'm gleeful about this.
I can't wait. And I'm so happy that we've got to spend so many episodes this year just talking about one of our most beloved films, which is Home Alone. And then we got to spend so much time just speculating on all of the things that these characters did beyond what we just see in the film.
It's been terrific. It's truly been amazing. It's been a wonderful opportunity.
Dream come true.
Thanks again to this entire town, to our entire listening audience.
Friend of the show, Bill Sikorsky. Can't thank you enough.
It's been an absolute pleasure, everybody. We are 1 minute away in just a few seconds. Jimmy, I think it is our duty to count this down.
We're
Are you
gonna
ready?
go 60 seconds.
It's
All right.
starting 60, 59, 58, 57, 56, 55, 54.
Hey, we got a telegram for both of you.
Oh, okay.
You should take a look.
All right.
Folks, I am so sorry. With only several seconds left, we've just been
We'll get through this.
given a telegram by the producer. Jimmy, can you take a look at this?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a pretty urgent message. It says, Bill Sikorsky's in a coma. Doctors suspect that he was poisoned. Unsure if he's going to survive the night. Jerry Novak has been promoted to chairman at the Sheboygan Chamber of Commerce. The Long Road Home Alone broadcast to end immediately.
Is that it?
There's a little note at the end here. It says, you guys give up or you're thirsty for more.